Hello YouTube, welcome back to another alternate history video, and today we got the 1968 election, which of course was held between Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey, and then independent candidate George Wallace also ran and actually won a few southern states. But in this alternate scenario, I got the Democratic nominee as JFK's brother Robert F. Kennedy, and Republican nominee George Romney, who is the father of Mitt Romney. And I still got Wallace as an independent candidate. Now, Robert F. Kennedy was actually assassinated in 1968. He did run for president, but of course, like I said, he was assassinated, so he didn't get the nomination, and Vice President Hubert Humphrey got it, and Richard Nixon got the Republican nomination, and like I said, Wallace ran as an independent candidate. But in this scenario, I got if Kennedy wasn't assassinated, and he gets the nomination, and George Romney gets the Republican nomination. Now, George Romney was a moderate Republican. He was actually in favor of civil rights, and I could see him actually doing pretty well in the regions where he was from. And I could see him faltering in the South due to his stance on civil rights. And I could see Wallace still winning the states that he did, actually picking up probably a few more that he was close to winning. And of course, Robert F. Kennedy was in favor of civil rights too, so him and Romney were actually pretty similar ideologically, if I can say that. Anyway, like I said, they were pretty close when it came to ideology, and so I could see both of them doing well in most regions, except the South, like I said. But getting into this, I believe Romney was still holding on to the Mountain West here, because they've still been pretty conservative for years. I could see him holding on to it. Like I said, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, as well as Utah, because Romney wasn't Mormon, I believe. I know Mitt was, and I believe George was as well. So I believe he would hold on to these Mormon-heavy states here in the Mountain West. And I believe he would take Nevada and Arizona as well. Now, maybe Robert F. could actually make a play in Nevada because his brother won it, but I believe George Romney would have the right appeal, especially being moderate himself, to win it. But I think it could be close, but he could be the judge there. But I believe he would hang on to Oregon and California as well. Now, California could be close, because Robert F. could do good in the cities, but I believe George Romney could too, and since Nixon won, of course, being his home state, and it was more of a conservative leaning state back then, I believe Romney could do well, like I said, especially in the cities, being moderate, and he could be more pro-amnesty, and of course more in civil rights, like I said, and probably more against the war in Vietnam, which was a hot-button issue this campaign, as well as race riots and protests and things like that. However, Hubert Humphrey did win Washington, but I believe Romney could have the right appeal to win there still, even with Wallace on the ballot. Because like I said, him winning Oregon, California definitely could make a play in Washington in the cities, but I believe it would be a close one. However, since Humphrey did win against Nixon, I believe it would actually barely go Kennedy if I had to go with my gut. And now these other states over here in the Midwest, I believe, will go solidly for Romney: North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Oklahoma. Although Wallace could actually make a play in Oklahoma, I think, but I believe Romney would have enough support, like in Tulsa and the cities, to hold on to it, but I think it would be a close one. However, Texas did go for Humphrey, because they had good, like, Hispanic, Latino support and all that. And I did go for JFK, I believe, so I think Robert F. Kennedy could actually hang on to Texas, so I will give it to him. However, these other states like Alaska, I believe, would go for Romney. However, Hawaii would go for Kennedy because they would have good minority support. Or Romney could get decent support there too, I think. Hubert Humphrey did win his home state of Minnesota, and it has gone Democrat for a long time now, so I believe Kennedy could still win there, but I think Romney could get decent support, especially in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities and the Iron Range, but I think Kennedy would hold on to it. However, Michigan, Wisconsin, where Romney was from, I believe would go solidly for him, even though I believe Wisconsin did go for, Wisconsin went for Nixon, and Humphrey actually won Michigan, but with it being Romney, I believe it would go for him, having the home state advantage, and he'd have good support, like in the industrial support with like unions and things like that, but Kennedy would have the support with him too, I believe. However, since Romney was from this region, I believe it would go for him. Now, I believe these other states would too, solidly, like Iowa, Illinois. I think Illinois would be a close one because Robert F. could do good in Chicago, especially Blacksport. But I believe Romney would do well too, so I believe it would be a close one. However, since Nixon won, I believe it would go Romney, as well as Indiana, Ohio. We'd have great working class support, and like I said, RFK would too, because he could run off his brother's support. But I believe Romney would pull these out since he's from this region too. Now, Missouri did go for Nixon, so I believe that would go for Romney. Now, getting into the deep south here, states that George Wallace won, I believe, is still good for him since Romney was heavily for civil rights as well as RFK. I believe Wallace would still take Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi as home state of Alabama, Georgia, the states that he won. Now, Florida could be interesting because Wallace did really good, like in the Panhandle and the northern part, but Nixon, in the actual scenario, did go like a Miami-Dade and the I-4 corridor, and I could see Romney doing good there. I believe it would be a close one, but I believe since Nixon won it, since he did good in this region, I believe Romney would too. I think Romney actually would win Florida, but I believe it would be a close one. Because like I said, Wallace would do good in the Panhandle like it did in the actual scenario. However, I could see Romney doing good here in Miami-Dade and I-4 corridor, like I said. Now, South Carolina actually did go for Nixon. However, Wallace wasn't far behind, and since it's Romney on the ballot, and like I say, he was for civil rights, I could actually see Wallace pulling out South Carolina since he almost did, so I'm actually going to give it to him. Now, Nixon won North Carolina as well, but Wallace wasn't far behind either in this state, and like I said with Romney, like I said in South Carolina, with them being for civil rights, I could see Wallace pulling off North Carolina, but it could definitely be a close one. But if I haven't given my gut, I think it could actually pull it off. You can give your thoughts below on whether you agree or not, but I could actually see Wallace pulling that off too, since he almost did against Nixon. Now, Tennessee and Kentucky were Nixon states, but Wallace only got about 18% of the vote in Kentucky, so I believe it wouldn't be enough for him if it was Romney on the ballot. However, I could see RFK possibly pulling it off, but with them being really for civil rights too, I don't know if he would win it, but like I said, Wallace can get as much support in the state because Nixon did good like in the rural parts, but of course I could see RFK and Wallace doing decent too like in the cities. But since Wallace didn't get as much support here, I believe Romney could actually hold on to this state. So I'm going to give it to him, as well as Tennessee. Wallace did come close to winning this state because he did good like in the western part over here. However, Nixon did good in the eastern part, but like I said, with Romney on the ballot, I could see him definitely doing good in this state, and I believe he would get it. Now, Virginia, however, has gone Republican up until 2008 from like the 60s, I believe. So I believe Romney would hold to say, of course, Wallace would do great in the rural parts, but of course, Romney would have good suburb supports like in Nova, so I believe that would go for him. However, West Virginia, I could see going for RFK, because they would have good working class support like the coal miners, and that was more of a Democratic state back then, so I believe that would hold on to Robert. And you can see Romney's over here at the top at 277, so he's elected in this scenario. But for the rest of the states, Heber Humphrey did win Pennsylvania because he had a good support like in Erie County in the western part. And so I could see that holding on to Robert F. as well as New York. Now, Romney could do good in New York City. I believe it would be a close one, but since it went for Humphrey, I believe RFK would actually get it. But I believe it would be definitely close. Now, Vermont and New Hampshire were more conservative-leaning states back then, and Romney is the right fit for these states being moderate, kind of like Nixon was too, so I believe they would go for him. But I could see it being closer because RFK, could do good with the college-educated voters as well, but since they were more moderate Republican states back then, I do believe they would go for Romney pretty solidly. However, I believe Maine could go for RFK because Heber Humphrey did pick Edmund Muskie as a running mate, and that's where he was from in Maine, so that's why Humphrey was able to win there and do good. But I believe RFK would still win there if I had to go with my gut, since it was a pretty solid margin for Humphrey. I don't know if RFK would pick Edmund as a running mate, but I believe it would still go for him. He would probably regress a few points, but I believe the margin was solid enough where he could hold on to Robert F. Now the rest of the northeastern states, Massachusetts, of course, was RFK's home state, so I believe that was solid to go for him, just like his brother JFK winning it. And Rhode Island here, they go for Humphrey solidly, so I believe that would go for Robert F. And Connecticut, it was a close one. Humphrey won it, and I could see Romney doing decent there, but since even Nixon could win it, I think Robert F.K. would still take Connecticut. He probably could do a little better being from this region, like I said, Massachusetts. And New Jersey here, it did go for Nixon, actually, by a few points, but I believe JFK did win New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to check that real quick. Yeah, he actually did, but it was a close one. And since JFK actually did win, and Robert F. Kennedy being from his region, I could see RFK pulling it out in a squeaker against Romney, but I believe it definitely will be close, like it was in the real scenario and in the 1960 election when JFK won it. Now Delaware. So Delaware did actually go for Nixon, because that was more of a moderate Republican state too back then. So I believe that would go for Romney. Now Maryland and D.C. did go for Humphrey, so I believe that would go Robert F. because he would have very support, like I said, being from this northeastern region, as well as D.C. always votes Democratic a lot. And this is my final map here. George Romney actually wins a pretty close election, 287, or at least close in the margin. He would win 287 to RFK's 171, and George Wallace would get 80. Because, like I said, I believe Wallace would win more southern states that he almost won against Nixon in the real scenario, with Romney being more for civil rights and things like that. And like I said, I would believe he would win those few other states. But if you agree, disagree, that's fine. Just tell me your thoughts below. And if you agree with this, like I said, I thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit the bell for notifications. And I'll see you next time.